All right, I'm gonna call this mobile fight analysis by myself because this is the very first time that I've ever done this. But I've been really getting into the fight game, and I see a lot of guys who just have really basic commentary about what they learn about MMA and what they know, and I appreciate that. But I just want to get into the meat. I want to keep it short, to the point, and talk about what it is that interests me in what I see in these potential fights coming up. UFC 183 is what's happening this Saturday, and it's a really solid, stacked card. Obviously headlined by Anderson Silva and Nate Diaz, and that's what I'm going to jump into first. I've watched quite a bit of footage on both. I've watched a lot of commentary, a lot of interviews, and what they've given us, the public, to digest about Anderson Silva's recovery. And from what I've seen, the man looks like he's as determined to get back in there and fight as I've ever seen, and at the same time refreshed and rejuvenated by the time off that he's had, the time off to really heal himself, to change his perspective on the fight game, to go back, break down his own fight technique, his moves. His standing game is phenomenal. I mean, if you go and you watch any of his highlights, nobody can obviously lay a punch on him. It wasn't until he goofed around with Chris Weidman that he finally met somebody who could match that speed and his ability to avoid punches. He obviously took Chris Weidman too lightly the first time around. The second time around was a bit of a, we all know that was a fluke. Not a fluke victory for Weidman, obviously, but just when your leg snaps in half, I mean, it's pretty tough to say that was a decisive victory or a decisive loss for Anderson Silva. So I don't buy it. I'm not going to go with that approach. But what I'll say is that obviously Anderson Silva's looking to reinstate himself in the fight world at his age. If you're 40 years old and you're jumping in the tank with these sharks like Chris Weidman, and you're willing to put yourself back out there on the line and risk your health and long-term well-being to compete in this sport, you have to love it. There's no two ways about it. And so I think we're going to see a brand new Anderson Silva, a rejuvenated Anderson Silva, and a guy who's going to put himself right back in the chase and the hunt for the belt again. So that brings me to Nick Diaz. Obviously a man who's been in the fight game as long as anybody. He's had 2 years off since his last fight. He's probably took himself. He probably took a nice break, to give himself, get himself away from the fight game for a little bit. I would imagine at the beginning of those 2 years, and then since then, from what I've seen, he's just been training, keeping himself in shape and just looking for that new motivation to get himself back out there and go through the grind, the training camp, the physical beating, the torture that it takes to get yourself primed to compete at this high level of UFC, and especially going up against the guy like Anderson Silva, who is by all accounts the Michael Jordan basically of MMA. And so from the footage that I've seen from Diaz, and as we all know, his jiu-jitsu is on point. It's phenomenal. Him and his brother compete in jiu-jitsu at an extremely high level. Their ground game is some of the most pure that you'll see in the sport. And then coupled that obviously with his stand-up game, which he actually prefers, being a boxer and having the background in boxing that he does, and getting himself in the type of stand-up battles that he would much more prefer to be in, especially with a guy like Anderson Silva, a guy who will stand in front of him and will throw fists to establish who's the more dominant fighter. Nick Diaz is by far, he's going to show up to be an improved fighter, a more honed in, focused fighter, because he's had the opportunity to absorb, to soak in who it is that he's going up against. And I saw an interview with him where he said, I don't have a reason to call this guy a motherfucker, to call him a bitch or anything like that. He understands who it is that he's putting himself in front of, and he understands the risk, the whole package. I think he understands the entire package of who it is he's getting in the ring against. And I think he's going to bring the best version of himself that we've ever seen. And the same with Anderson Silva. This is going to be probably one of the most electric fights. If it lasts, it'll be one of the most electric fights that we've ever seen. It could also be one of the quickest fights you've ever seen. Anderson could submit Nate. He could knock Nate out. Anderson's shown that he, with the right power, I'm not, putting Nick Diaz in the same power class as Chris Weidman, but Anderson's shown that his chin, if it's tapped, he will go down. So this is going to be the fight of fights. You have to respect Anderson Silva. He's in the top two probably all time of MMA fighters ever. I think it'll end with him and John Jones for at least for the next 20 years. That'll be the case. And Nick Diaz, a man who's obviously established his own legacy in the sport. He's been around a long time, almost 15 years, and he's coming out, he's just been looking for the fuel to feed the fire. So this fight, and I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to say upset. I want to see Nick. I want to see him go out there and reinvigorate himself, reinvent himself, and become a top-tier fighter again, and restoke that fire, and maybe go on a little title chase here. So I'm going to call upset on it and go with that. The other fights on the card, the Tyron Woodley and Kevin Gastelum fight. I'm not overly familiar with Gastelum, and which I'm trying to research and learn his game. But him and Woodley is going to be a fantastic fight as well. And based on the footage and the video that I've seen of Tyron Woodley, pure athlete, just a human pit bull, a human rattlesnake that's just as venomous and dangerous as anybody in the ring when he touches you up. His problem, which he was shown by the fight he had with Rory McDonald, he lost. And in my opinion, if you were to go against a guy like Rory McDonald, who is an inferior athlete, but a much more honed in technical craftsman in his game, and you go, between the two, being the great athlete and being the technician, which McDonald is, and the athlete, which Woodley is, for Woodley to go in there and not take advantage of what he has over McDonald shows me the chink in his armor. Obviously he learned a lot from that fight. He knows better. He knows what his weaknesses were and why he didn't take advantage of his strengths to lose a fight like that, because I believe that Tyron Woodley would give Robbie Lawler serious problems. And Robbie Lawler had it manhandled McDonald. So I'm going to go ahead in this fight. I'm going to say Tyron Woodley redeems himself. Again, I need to do more research on Gastelum. He looks like a phenomenal guy, a tough guy, agile guy, well-versed fighter in his stand-up. His ground game, his fitness seems to be phenomenal, and he's going to come out hungry and looking to make a name for himself, because he's in the title hunt. He's just like Woodley was. He has an unbeaten record in MMA and 4-0 in the UFC, and I really think he's coming out to make a name for himself. So this fight also is just as explosive in the present time for these two guys as the the explosiveness of the Diaz Silva fight is for their long-term futures, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go in this fight. I'm going to go with Woodley. I think he's still coming up. I think he's probably the most dangerous guy in that division. But he's going to have to overcome some roadblocks, or not even roadblocks, but some speed bumps along the way. And I think he's going to come out and he's going to establish himself as a title contender again here soon, and even get hopefully another shot at McDonald's. So I'm going to go with those two predictions for now. So we got Silva upset, or Diaz upsetting Silva in the first fight, and Woodley taking out Gastelum in the second fight. And you know, what I hope will be a phenomenal fight card. UFC's on fire right now. These last few fights, if you're a fan, just like I am, it's the momentum that it's gaining, the names that are coming out there, the guys that are showing up and putting on performances for all of us fans. You know, we owe them our respect and appreciation always. And my respect and admiration goes out to all those guys. And if you guys who train, I train, I love training. And if you train hard, you understand what it is. You know, you get a little taste of what those guys put themselves through. And so my hat's off to all of them for doing what they do for us as the fans. So I hope you guys like this video. I'm going to definitely do my best to make more, and you know, send me any feedback that you want. And I'll hopefully keep providing the MMA meat that you know, stokes your interest, that keeps you engaged in the sport just the way I am. All right, this is John. Take it easy. I'm out.